all those that are out there listening to Hoya Locker Room. This is Hoya Locker Room, episode 65. I'd like to apologize. We're starting a little bit late. We had some technical difficulties. We will only be running on Gene Smith's Facebook page, but per normal, we will be uploading later on YouTube. So that's just to get that out the way early. We have today with us an illustrious, esteemed guest, Coach James Butch McAdams, the protector and preserver of DC basketball hoops and culture. I want to add that culture part because what you represent is, I think, what all the old heads would say. You're the last of the Mohicans. Like, you carry all the text, you carry all the information, and I know you had a show today, so I want to thank you for taking time to come on Hoya Locker Room. You mean a lot to us. You mean a lot to us in the DC area. You mean a lot to me personally. And, I just want to thank you. And with that, I want to bring in Markham to say a few words, and we'll get this thing rolling. We'll chop it up a little bit.
Well, before we get into today's show, I just want to send two shout outs. One to my former roommate, Robert Churchwell. His birthday is today. Happy birthday. And the other to another former roommate of mine. I call him the best player never to play for Georgetown. We also had a birthday this weekend, Johnny Jones, 2 22s. Between them, they played a lot. If you combine Johnny.
Gonna be coach. You already see.
I see. I love it.
Yeah, so we're glad to have you here. Looking forward to the show.
Mm-hmm. So with that, Coach, I'd just like to start from the beginning. As I mentioned in the brief intro, you mean a lot to DC as it relates to basketball. You've been around for the last 40 years. Coach, player, you coached at Murray. You started numerous organizations as it relates to helping the kids grow up with mentors. I think, you epitomize, you represent the best of DC, the best of DC basketball, as I stated earlier. So with that, how would you describe the origin of DC basketball and its earliest pioneers, yourself included?
Yeah, well, the origin of DC basketball goes back to the early 1900s, where a gentleman by the name of I'm drawing a blank right now.
You're a hardworking man. That's okay.
Yeah. But he was the godfather of Black basketball. Okay, and so he learned the game from Dr. Naismith, and he brought the game back to Washington, D.C. So the DC area youngsters had a leg up on most other areas and how to play this new game and how to play it by the rules and learn the fundamentals. And it's Dr. Edwin B. Henderson, Dr. Henderson.
I was over here doing my Google because I had it on the top of my head too.
I've mentioned him a number of times. As you say, I'm making a transition from one show to another, but I got it. It's Dr. Edwin B. Henderson. And I believe Dr. Henderson was responsible for the foundation of great basketball being played in the area. And then from there, just so many great players, Elgin Baylor, Dave Bing, Austin Carr, Johnny Jones, just to name a few, on and on and on. Right. And great coaches, Morgan Wooten.
So you introduced something earlier that I was going to save for later, but this is a fluid conversation. Again, with having someone like you who is a historian and protector of everything good in DC. Sure. I am privy to your Mt.Rushmore of DC basketball, and right. I just give the initials, so it starts with AD, KD, DB, and EB.
You can't dispute that. No one can argue that. I mean, it's nonsensical if you're going to take one of those players off and add some. Now, there are other great players, but if you talk about a Mount Rushmore, which is 4, how do you beat Elgin Baylor, who revolutionized the game, Kevin Durant, who
revolutionized the game.
yeah, to a certain extent, and but also Kevin Durant throughout his career was number 2 or number 1 best player on the planet. Adrian Dantley, and Dave Bing. How do you debate that? And there are very few areas, municipalities, that their Mount Rushmore could compete or compare to our Mount Rushmore.
And the reason why I bring that up, because we have a Memphis cat in Mr. Stansbury Jr.
Mhm.
So I would beckon him to mention his Mount Rushmore up against that one, Coach.
Well, that Mount Rushmore is hard to beat. I will grant that, but as I say, week in and week out, pound for pound, mile for mile, you're not gonna get better basketball than Memphis Tennessee. I will run that hill, but Gene, I think don't undersell folks, but I think you have undersold Coach McAdams when you were talking about him. And
I agree.
And one of the things we always do is have people tell their story. So I'm very interested to hear, and the underselling for the people who don't know, we're talking to somebody who's in the DC Hall of Fame for athletics. And I'm interested in the journey that led you to be one of the inaugural inductees into the DC Hall of Fame. I think it was in 2017.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I start off by always giving thanks to the Almighty. I mean, I can't take credit for anything. Everything comes through His blessings. I grew up as a sports fan. My father and my older brother were sports fans, and they would have the games on, and they would read the newspapers. And when I got old enough to understand what I was watching, I became an avid sports fan. And I just love sports. I love going to the games. I love the excitement, the roar of the crowd, the competitiveness. So I knew early on that I wanted to do something in sports. And I always tell the story how I worked out an agreement with my mother that 2 days out of the year, I could have unexcused absences from school. One day was the beginning of the World Series, and back then they played the World Series during the day. And the other one was the beginning of opening day of Major League Baseball. And I remember at a class reunion some 15 years ago, and we went to a Catholic elementary school, shout out to St. Augustine's, that sister at the time said, yeah, I remember you were always absent the day of the World Series and baseball. And I said, yes, sister, I was. I said, but it paid off because I got my own sports show now. So yeah, that was the story. But I always loved sports, always loved sports. And, I was a fair basketball player, skill-wise. I could shoot well, I could pass. I knew the game exceptionally well, but I wasn't physically gifted. And I always wanted, if I do something, I always wanted to have an opportunity to be the best. So I decided that if I played basketball, I played well enough to understand the game, but never an outstanding player like you guys. But I knew the game very well, and I felt where I would average player.
You said an outstanding player like you guys. But before that, you talked about, I just want to make the distinction. I don't mean to cut you off, but
No,
you
that's fine.
said you were a great shooter.
I was a very good shooter, no question. I could shoot. I could flat out shoot, but I couldn't jump to a conclusion. I couldn't jump over a Mayberry telephone book.
So Mark,
Gene Smith, for as great as a perimeter on-ball defender as he was, Coach, this guy could not shoot. I don't know if you remember, but Gene did not play in the national championship game. My mother felt very bad for him, but the reason he didn't play is he hurt himself on a breakaway layup. So I don't want you to put yourself below Gene Smith as a basketball player.
Oh no, I'm way below Gene Smith.
Because basketball is a package deal. You know, we need to do a lot of things.
This is a perfect. But see, Mark, I'm gonna cut you off for one reason alone. I played on the court with Coach McAdams, and whatever he talking about he couldn't do, he made up for up here. And we would literally, and I got to give a shout out to Dallas Grassley.
Oh my goodness,
that day. And these are my OGs. These are my mentors. These are guys I learned the game from, and the game above the neck. So whatever he talking about, he couldn't jump to a conclusion. He ran the court wherever he was playing on. So let's just get that established, Coach.
Yeah. Well, you know, I always tell people I played well enough to understand the game so I could coach it at a high level. But I just love sport, and I knew that I would be involved in sport. I got to give a shout out to Father Raymond Kemp. That guy means so much to me. As I said, I've been blessed, man. God has put so many great mentors in my life to help me. And Father Kemp was one of the first. And if it weren't for Father Raymond Kemp, I don't know where I'd be. I don't know what I would have done. Father Kemp was the one who says, I'm starting a basketball program back up at St. Augustine, and I want you to be my coach. And for like 3 or 4 times or more, I kind of said, no, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. And then finally he wore me down, thank God. And I said, okay, I'm going to do it for 1 year to get you off my back, and I'm not doing it again. Well, I started it. And at the time I was just 20 years old. And so my players were between 13 and 15. But I just loved it. And then one day, one of the players came to me and said, you know what, Coach McAdams, we went to a camp this summer, and he named a couple people who were like all Met players at the time. And he said, they were there, but we have learned more from you in a week than we learned from them in a month. And when he told me that, it just, yeah, man, you know, it just floored me. And then after that, I knew coaching was something that I wanted to do.
I'm glad you brought up Father Kemp. I was going to bring him up because in doing a little background on you, I read an article that Harold Bell wrote, and he mentioned him. I was curious about your mentors on and off the court, but since you mentioned Father Kemp, there was another quote in that came up in that article. I just wanted you to kind of expand on it. Every black face you see is not your brother, and every white face you see is not your enemy.
That was Harold Bell. Okay, that was Harold Bell. And you know, there's an old saying, you don't mind being a copycat if you know what cat to copy. But I always give, when I say that, I always give him credit. But Harold was the first person I heard that, and it was so profound. And, you know, he would always say, every white face you see is not your enemy, and every black face you see is not your friend. And I've subscribed to that.
Very good. Very good.
Powerful. How long were you at St. Augustine's before you headed to Murray?
Well, I was at St. Augustine's for 4 years. 4 years. And man, we had some great teams and some great players. 2 of the 4 years, we won national championships. And what I mean by national championship, the CYO, you have your area championship. And then whoever wins the area in a given category plays in the Middle Atlantic. And that's the champions of DC area, Baltimore, Philadelphia, and Wilmington, Delaware. And so 2 of the 4 years, we won championships, national championships. And then from there, it's all connected.
All connected.
We played a tournament at St. Albans. And that was the year we won the national championship of the Middle Atlantics. We were undefeated. And we had 2 players on that team, Billy Green and Chet Underwood. And Father Kemp, I always tell folks, and you've heard the expression, that coaching staffs don't win championships, but administrations win championships. And I know Coach Thompson would say that. And in my case with Father Kemp, he was the ultimate administrator, where he believed in the program, he emphasized the program, and it was more than basketball. It was the carrot on the stick to bring in young men and to make sure that they stayed on the right and narrow path and assist them in going to high school. And that's what we did. That's what we did. But we were playing at St. Albans, and we won the tournament. And at the time, St. Albans had a program called the RISK program, where they were identifying minority African-American students through sport. And they were interested in Billy Green and Chet Underwood. Well, Bill accepted, Chet didn't. And long story short, Bill's sophomore year, he calls me before the season and said, "Coach, are you interested in coaching and teaching part-time at St. Albans, coaching the JV?" And I said, "Absolutely." So I coached the JV team, assistant varsity coach and head JV coach at St. Albans in 1974, 1975. And I, taught a PE class there in the afternoon. And then from there, 1976, I go to Mackin, my alma mater, and I was assistant there. And then I get a phone call one day from John Dodd, who was the head coach at St. Albans. And he said, "Hey, look, there's a little small school down the street by the name of Murray, and they're looking for a coach. Are you interested?" I said, "Sure." And he said, "It's small, but it's a good start." So again, I called, I got an interview, and I met another remarkable human being, another mentor by the name of Peter Sturdivant, who was the head of Murray. Peter Sturdivant was very similar to Father Kemp, very, very similar to Father Kemp. And what I mean by that is 2 white men who could blend in anywhere. I would always say Father Kemp could walk with the crown heads, and he could walk with the with the wine heads. He could be comfortable on Wisconsin Avenue, standing in front of the cathedral, or he could be comfortable on Florida Avenue, standing in front of the liquor store. And Peter Sturdivant was like that. And so I knew Murray was the place I wanted to work, and the rest is history.
What were some of your better teams at Murray?
My first really good team was 1982. And I started in 78. So in 81, we had a good team. Okay. And I'm gonna tell you another quick story.
Please.
We, after my third year, and the players that I recruited were juniors, I said, okay, we're ready to see how good we are. So I scheduled a lot of public schools, Catholic schools, and we beat Eastern. We beat Eastern. When my manager called the score in, Donald Huff, who at the time was the sports director, high school sports director for the Post, he initially thought it was a prank. He said, no, Murray? Where's Murray? Who is Murray? They beat Eastern. So he called the Eastern coach to verify. And so that was 81 was the start. 82 was our first ranked team. Mm-hmm. And we had a really good team. We had a guy, his older brother was a star player at Tech before you, named James Gorham, Go-Go. And so I coached Kendrick Gorham, and we called him Go-Go. And him and Daryl Briggs came from Taft, and they were my first two recruits. And hey, I always thank them, because without them, again, I don't know where I would be. And my theme is this: it's never about you. It's about the people who've helped you. And when I receive an award or I have to speak, I always mention, I don't talk that much about me, but I talk about the people who assisted me on this voyage. Father Kemp, Peter Sturdivant, my players, Kendrick Gorham, Daryl Briggs, Terry Coffey, and Adam Land. I mean, on and on and on for so many years. So 82 was a great team. We had great teams of players that I recruited, okay? And for a couple of years, I left Murray and went to Mackin, but then I came back. But 86 was probably our most talented team, where we had 5 Division I players. And that was quite an accomplishment for a school that probably only had about maybe 150 boys at the time. And we were 6'7", 6'7", 6'8", 6'3". And we had an outstanding point guard at the time, Sylvester Simmons, Dwayne Simpkins' older brother. So I would say 82, 86, 88, 90, 92, 94, and 99, and 2004 were my best teams.
So that Simpkins you just mentioned, I don't know the nickname, but I remember, I think there was a guy named Dickie Simpkins who played at Providence. Are they related?
Yeah.
No, they're not related. I'm talking about Sylvester Simpkins, and we call him Sly. He made second or third team All-Met in 1982. Okay. And he was one heck of a player. 1988, he made All-Met. And we also had a really good big post player named Anthony Carr. We call him Big Ant. And that team, we should have beaten DeMatha. We led DeMatha by 2 points with 5 seconds to go. And at the buzzer, Gerard Mustafa, I love him, but I can't stand him for this, leaped up and tapped the ball in, and they sent it into overtime, and they beat us. And again, I want to shout out to, I had the absolute best assistant coach in Charles Lewis. We called him the Spook. And he was just we were a great team, because some of the things that I didn't like to do, he loved, and some of the things that he didn't like to do, I could do. And I could not have built the program without him. Could not, because this guy had a book on all of the junior high school players in the city. And he was my recruiter. And then he would, identify the players, and then we'd sit down and talk to the parents, and we'd close the deal. And so go ahead.
No, I was going to say, a shout out to Mr. Lewis. But you mentioned DeMatha, and I'm an inner high dude, and you mentioned DeMatha, and all I think about is, we wanted to beat DeMatha too. But it just brings up, obviously, we want to get your feelings and your emotions around the Georgetown program. But just talking about Morgan Wooten and DeMatha and what they meant to the city in terms of DC hoops, and then position that next to a Dunbar and a Spingarn and what they meant to the inner high and what they meant to DC hoops. So if you can give us a situation on that.
Well, let's start when you talk about basketball royalty from a historic perspective. Let's start back with, the 54 team with Elgin Baylor and Spingarn. And then you have the legend of Gary Mays. Are you familiar with the Bandit? It was one of probably the best athlete all around to come out of DC. This guy could play football, basketball, and baseball was his best sport. And he did all of that with the use of just one arm. And so he was a legend. And then you had the Cardozo teams with Coach Frank Bolden, Frank P. He doesn't get enough credit. He's one of the all-time great coaches. The first 3 city championship games after segregation, Cardozo played in 3, and they won 2. They beat Gonzaga in 1957. They beat John Thompson and Carroll in 58, and then they lost to Carroll in 59. And those were great teams. And there's a story that was the game was a huge upset because Carroll had defeated them by a wide margin earlier in the season. But Coach Thompson, as the legend goes, was so upset that he cried all the way home. But he didn't just cry. He put the clipping that appeared in the paper in his locker, and he kept it in there for motivation. And the next year, Coach had something like 18 points at the half. and then after that was it. That Carroll team is the greatest. I gave you my Mount Rushmore, but the greatest team, in my opinion, is 1959 Carroll team.
Wow.
So,
I say wow because guys that I know this is Charles Smith. The second is Bobby Winston, and the third used to buy. And I think on their team at Anthony.
So you're breaking up, Markham. So I think
I couldn't hear him.
you talked about the St. Anthony team with Charles Smith and Bobby Winston. I think he was.
Yeah, right. But before I get to that, if I can, I just want to, do it from a historic perspective. Okay, as I said, that 1959 Carroll team with Coach Thompson, Tom Hoover, Monk Malloy, Skinner, and George Leffridge and John Austin, best team ever. Best team ever. If you could do a mythical game, I defy anybody to beat this team because they had everything. They had a 6'10". Coach Thompson was one of the first, if you want to use the terminology, stretch four. That's what he was. Coach wasn't a gorilla. Coach was Coach was 6'10", 6'11", but he was smooth. He could shoot the hook. He could shoot the perimeter shot facing the basket. Tom Hoover was the gorilla at 6'9". He was the ultimate enforcer. And then you had George Leffridge, who was like Oscar Robertson, could do everything. And then Skinner and Malloy could shoot. That was the best team. And then after that team, you had the spin guard team. And then with Dave Bing, Ollie Johnson, Monk Malloy, et cetera. And then comes the DeMatha dynasty with John Austin, Johnny Jones. And in 1965, DeMatha put high school basketball on the map, not DC, high school. Because that game with Powell Memorial, that was a national game, and DeMatha won that game. But you know what I always say? That wasn't an upset. DeMatha was supposed to win that game. Because if you look, they were playing at home, sellout crowd, Cofield House. They had Sid Catlett, Bob Whitmore, Bernard Williams, Ernie Austin, and Mickey Wiles. That was a heck of a team.
That's a heck of a team. That's a heck of a team, man.
But they put the high school ball on the map, and certainly they put DC ball on the map. And then after that, the great teams just kept coming. You talk about Dunbar. When I think of Dunbar, I think of Will Jones.
Yes, sir. Shout out to Will Jones.
The Muhammad Ali before his time. Will came into a game one time when he was playing, and the great Skip Wise over in Baltimore.
Yes, sir.
And Will went up to him and said, "Hey, young boy, I hear you good, man. I hear you may get 35 tonight." He said, "But I'm gonna get 40." And he told him that before the game, and guess what? That's what Will got, at least. And then from Will Jones, man, Joe Dean Davison, great coach. But before then, McKinley, your alma mater.
Yes, sir.
Great history. Ed Taylor, Hucklebuck. William Wormsley, called him Hucklebuck. Preston Gale, Trueheart, Earl Thorne. Just great teams. And then in the late 60s, Tech won championship in 68.
Yes, sir.
In 69. And that 69 team is one of the all-time great teams. They would call themselves the Magnificent Seven. And that was Kevin Tatum, Ronnie Hogue, Apple Milam, Tim Bassett, Michael Bozard, Tyrone Bradshaw, and Nehru Brown. All those guys. Just a great
Coach, man, I could listen to you all day, man. I get chills listening to your stories.
Now you had asked me about.
You guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Just stay there though. Just listen.
Yeah. I'm gonna stay here. But I don't know if you heard me. I was bringing up that St. Anthony's team with the 3 Georgetown guys and Michael Best. When I came back, it seems like you named 10 others, and I just want to say I'm glad to hear you say that, because I'm gonna send this tape to some of these guys who've been telling me about how great their team was.
Well, no. Let me get to it, because I didn't hear you. That was a great team. That team was probably one of the most underrated great teams of all time. And
so I got with Smitty, Bobby.
Look, I got first. Look, I had firsthand experience of that team because we played them every year.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And first of all, before they arrived, Dwight Datcher was a dear friend of mine and one of the best coaches, great guy. We would split every year. We would beat them when they came to our place. They would beat us when we came over there. But when Datcher recruited that crew of Winston, Bess, Philip Gamble,
Phil Gamble.
Wally Lancaster was there one year, and just Johnny Struggs, so many others. That was a great team. So if they're telling you that they were great, I co-sign. They were great. and Charles Smith came off the bench. I
Did
mean, that's
Sam
how
Jefferson start on that team, or did he come
Yes.
off the bench also?
No, Sam started. Okay, but and Smitty could have started anywhere. But they just had so many players. And we never beat that crew, but I am proud, as good as they were, we always gave them a competitive game. When I say a competitive game, I'm talking about 10 points, 8 points, 9, something like that. Because we couldn't match them player for player. No one could. But we had one player that they or nobody could stop. Nobody could. In 1984, I had a player that was, I would say, the best offensive guard in the area that year. And his name was Terry Coffey. So Terry was my equalizer. But we didn't have enough around him to beat him. But Terry kept us in the game because when he walked in the gym, everybody knew that he was the man, but he would always get 30 and 35, sometimes 40.
So
But
if I mention the name Terry Coffey to Charles Smith, is he gonna have a flashback and start going into PTSD?
Well, I don't know about PTSD, but
You don't know who you talk about.
Absolutely. They, as I always say, they know him by name. But no, that was a great team. But as great as that team was, I don't know if that was the best St. Anthony team, because Coach Thompson had a great team one year several years. Merlin Wilson, Donald Washington, Greg Brooks, Jonathan Smith. I mean, Datcher played on that team, on and on and on. So St. Anthony's had a history of great teams, great teams.
I want to say, just rest in peace and a special word to Dwight Datcher. Obviously, I want to his family. Definitely want to say that. We
much respect.
Remember those who came before us and who put down some work in this city. Mm-hmm. You bring up something. You talked about that St. Anthony team. You just talked about the Coach Thompson had. That was like the first recruiting class to Georgetown.
It was.
But before that, I'd like you to touch on the Morgan Wooten, John Thompson scenario as the first coach. Like, please, because the story's been told, but I want the folks to hear from you. How did that play out?
Well, it played out because you had two giants who had the ultimate respect for one another, but it was always a game of upsmanship. Okay. And
that's not checkers.
No, it was a game of upsmanship. Okay. And they never could play the game. Everybody wanted the game to be played because DeMatha and St. Anthony's were 1-2. I remember a year where St. Anthony's was number 2 in DC and number 1 in the country. Okay, and so everybody wanted the game. But then Coach Wooten wanted the game at Cole Fieldhouse. Coach Thompson said, no, we're gonna play it at Howard. Okay, and again, I just think it was just upsmanship where neither one of these giants wanted to let the other one get the upper hand and dictate. Now, here's the story. Here's the story behind that. Jello Summer League. This is the summer of probably 1972 or 71, before the 72 season. They're both in the Jello Summer League. And so now, I never forget, they're scheduled to play one another. And man, if you remember old Jello from the games outside, you had people on the rooftop and sitting in lawn chairs. I mean, it was packed. And everybody was excited, man. We're finally going to see, even though it's Summer League, we're finally going to see St. Anthony's versus the Met. And they're warming up. You know, you've got the St. Anthony's people down there, Johnny Smith and Merlin Wilson and Cheese Holloway may have been on that team. And they're warming up, and Adrian Dantley and Carol Holmes and Langlow, they're warming up, and we're saying, oh man, we can't wait. The game starts. Coach Wooten sends his starting five out with Adrian and Carol Holmes and Langlow and people like that. Coach Thompson sends five guys that I had never seen in my life. He sends out a average intramural team. Coach Wooten was furious. And they played the game. And, you know, the Mather must have beat them by about 100 points. But Coach gave, again, that was his way of getting the upper hand and say, hey, you don't want to play me in the regular season, we ain't playing you in the Summer League. Never forget that. But let me say that they had the utmost respect for one another. And I was in the middle of the feud, so to speak, because I loved them both. They both.
So, but I want you to take me from there to now the Georgetown job is available.
Say this again, the Georgetown job is what?
So the Georgetown job is now available, the 72-73 season.
Oh, okay.
So,
I thought you were talking about currently.
So the Georgetown gig is available. Clearly those two giants are the first candidates.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If you have any, can you explain what that was like?
Well, again, upsmanship, competitiveness, and Coach Thompson got the job. I mean, Coach Thompson got the job. He was young, he was hot in terms of his commodity. He had great teams from St. Anthony, as we spoke of, and it was a tremendous hire. I don't know how much Coach Wooten wanted that job. I think the only job that Coach really wanted, really wanted, was the University of Maryland.
That makes sense.
Okay. But Coach got the job. And this is a little known fact. One of the first individuals that he brought over as his assistant was a Morgan Wooten assistant by the name of Frank Fuqua, who was the dean of working on post moves at the time. And all those great post players that the Mather produced, they all give Frank Fuqua credit. And Coach Thompson was aware of this guy's talent, and he brought him in along with George Lethbridge.
So the absence of a DeMatha player on Georgetown's roster, that wasn't an accident. And until Austin Freeman, shout out to Austin Freeman, a DeMatha player never graced that roster. Mm-hmm. Was that part of the upmanship, or you just think that was accidental?
No, I don't think it was accidental. No, I don't think.
Leave that alone, Butch, because you're in the middle.
No. I don't. The truth will set you free. That wasn't accidental.
Yeah.
And when Coach got the job, he inherited a Morgan Wooten player. good friend of mine named Mark Edwards.
Mark Edwards.
And I don't think Mark got much of a playing time under coach.
Other coach.
So no, I don't think that was accidental. And it was unfortunate because, once again, two giants, two guys who represented basketball well, and certainly DMV basketball well.
So speaking of that, I want to stay on the collegiate scene. And you mentioned a great season, I think, at Murray in '82. So I want to talk about '82 season, UDC. They win the national championship, Division II. Georgetown team '82, they're the runner-ups in the NCAA championship game. What would that game look like? Those two squads playing against each other. What would that have looked like? Will Jones at the helm, Coach Thompson at the helm.
Well, more importantly, I'd be more interested in Coach Thompson and Coach Jones on the sidelines. that would be the real.
That would be the game.
Okay, but I think Georgetown's deep bench would be too much for him. So I don't think that would be that great of a game.
That great of a game. Which brings me to, I'd like to be the first one to start a chant, start a rally for a Coach McAdams Invitational, which would represent all of the teams in the district or the DMV, the Catholic, American, Georgetown, GW, Howard,
Maryland,
possibly
being in the tournament. Why?
Well, let me say that, and thank you for that. I'm humbled by that. But there is something out there. Mm-hmm. My former school, Murray, they have the McAdams invitation. Prior to COVID, they would have that every year. Mm-hmm. And so they have it. And, my standard line is, as long as it is the invitation and not the memorial, I'm sorry. But I certainly appreciate that.
Coach, let me ask you, since Gene brought that up, do you think in the area, because I think of the Big Five in Philly with Temple, Villanova, Penn, St. Joe's, and LaSalle, if they were to do Georgetown, American, Maryland, do you think there would be a huge appetite for that in the DMV to put together, the 5 or 6 schools we have in the area?
It would be not as much as it was back then, because once again, we talked about the DeMatha and St. Anthony's with Coach Thompson and Coach Wooten, but we wanted to see Maryland and Georgetown with Coach Drizel and Coach Thompson, and they played one year at the Armory, and the highlight of that game, from my perspective, was that they had to separate Coach Drizel and Coach Thompson at half court.
Wow.
But it's always good. It's good for the area to do it. But things are so political, where folks didn't want to play because they didn't want to lose and give the other local school an edge in recruiting. I would love to see a tournament. I mean, even if we can't have games, have a DMV Classic every year. Yes, that would be good.
The reason why I pose this question to you, sir, is because, again, I feel like you're an ambassador.
Appreciate that.
For us. And I've listened to your radio show enough. And for those who have not, it's worth a listen. It's on 104. Am I getting this right? It's on 1040 a.m. Is that
No. My radio show is on. You can get my radio show out of the area or best listen on the net at WOLDCnews.com. That's
And I
WOLDCnews.com.
tagged them on Twitter. So
And then my podcast, you can get it on the African American Athlete.com.
And I recommend that to all our listeners and all our followers. And where I was going with that is your non-sport related guest.
Mm-hmm.
You're more than just a sports show. You're more.
That's why it's titled In and Out of Sports. That's right.
That's right. So I could not think of anyone better served to put this forward. So when you mention, there's a reason why you're in the Hall of Fame, sir.
Thank you.
So I'm not trying to put something else on your plate, but I do think if anyone can steer this ship, because I think it's a miss for us in DC. I love the fact that Howard and Georgetown are playing each other regularly now. I like the fact that Kenneth Blakeney has come back home and is coaching at Howard, and he's trying to put a flag post down and has challenged Georgetown as the premier school in the district. I think competition does nothing but breed success.
I agree.
But I'd love to do anything I can to help support you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, because I think it's it would be awesome. Like just be one of those tribute things. And again, just speaking to the amount of people that come through your show, you have you're pretty dialed in, sir. So, and again, I'd love to see something like that happen. With that, I'd like to just real quick before I forget. And we're over an hour now, and I want to thank you. Usually, when we get to an hour, we let our guests know. But I told Mark we can talk to you all day. Like you're a thesaurus, you're a dictionary, you're almanac. What would be? And I'm going back to the Mount Rushmore scenario. What would be your Georgetown Mount Rushmore?
Oh, that's a good one. Georgetown Mount Rushmore.
I got you. If he said it was a good, if Coach said it's a good one, it was a good one.
All right, but I'm ready for it. Patrick Ewing, Lonzo Mourning, Allen Iverson, and that fourth one, I'm solid with Ewing, Iverson, Mourning, and I got to go with Mutombo.
Okay.
Got to go with Mutombo.
No Baltimore guy.
Now, if you had asked me my Georgetown defensive Mount Rushmore,
we're not gonna go there because Mark will gonna have something slick to say, Coach. We're not going there.
See, I was gonna say before you, I was gonna say shout out to my brother, one of my very best friends, Mike Riley.
I talked to Mike Riley this week. We're gonna have him on. That's a good mention.
It's a good mention.
Well, look. If write this down.
I'm writing. I got my pen and paper, Coach.
When you interview Mike Riley, all you got to say is you interviewed someone, and then all you have to say is, "I got these."
I got these.
And Mike Riley and I, we were like 9 years old, 10 years old, playing youth basketball, and Mike would pass me the ball and look for it back, and I'd say, "I got these," and I let it go. but no,
not getting it back.
Mm-hmm. That's right. But no, it's, as I say, just so many great people that have influenced me, that have assisted me, in basketball and in radio. You mentioned Harold Bell, Larry Hicks, Joe Madison, Kathy Hughes, on and on and on.
Yeah, the thing that I guess, Coach, like I said, we're so thankful for your time. I'd like to just if you can touch on your transition into radio. Was that a natural thing for you? Because again, I just think it's so awesome that you're still.
Well, it was natural. Wasn't smooth, wasn't easy because I had to work. But again, went back to people that God has blessed me to put in my life. Dallas Grasky. Oh, Dallas, I love you, man. That guy, other than my father and my brother, Father Kemp, he's right there. And Dallas was the one. Dallas was friends with Miss Hughes. And he asked Miss Hughes, are you guys going to do sports? And she said, yeah. And she said, well, Dallas said, well, have you settled on anyone? She said, no, but go talk to the not the athletic, but the program director. And he talked to the program director named Larry Hicks. And Larry said, well, we're talking to a guy from Pittsburgh. And, as only Dallas could say, Pittsburgh, you can't have anybody in DC from Pittsburgh talking sports. And so he recommended me, and the rest is history. I just love him. Thank you.
Well, this is a true honor, man. Yeah, thank you so much for stopping through, and you're welcome back anytime. Particularly when they announced that DC Classic, when they announced that, you're welcome back to talk about it. But we love you here, man, and just thank you so much for your time. Nothing but love and respect.
And it's mutual. And also, thank you. You've agreed to return the favor, and you're going to be a guest tomorrow on my podcast. And write this down, folks. You can dial into the chat room at 929-477-1209. That's 929-477-1209. And hear the visit with Gene Smith tomorrow.
What time will that be?
6 p.m. Eastern.
So again, Coach, thank you so much. Markham, you have any final words to close us out with this illustrious guest that we had today?
Only got two.
Yes,
Thank you.
I appreciate
Thank you.
And I want to hear what I got these.
I got these. That's right. All right, thank you, guys. My man.
Appreciate
Thank
you.
you. God bless.
God bless.